So Anthony Prohaska with me from Cover One today. Boy Green has the morning off. We are talking all things Buffalo Bills. And today's broadcast brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive. Okay, Anthony. Well. First things first. I don't know if I should work from back to forward or forward to back. Let's go back to forward, okay? Because the latest stuff to me is the most scintillating and interesting, and then we can work our way back to what happened over the weekend to the Buffalo Bills, who obviously were eliminated from the playoffs. All right, so let's start with this press conference. All right, so everybody kind of is, I think, in the loop. Sean McDermott's no longer the head coach. Brandon Beane has been promoted and given all the powers of the football operations world. And a lot of people kind of shaking their heads or looking both directions as to what exactly happened here. I thought part of this was a talent issue, and yet here we are promoting the one guy and throwing the other guy under the bus. Kind of weird. And Terry Pegula is hearing the noise, and so he decides, hey, Brandon, why don't me and you get in front of a couple of microphones here and straighten this whole thing out? And okay, he was out there to straighten the whole thing out. Did he straighten the whole thing out, Anthony? What was your take on the Pegula, overarching take on the Pegula Beane press conference?
I think it was messy and muddy at times. I thought Pegula didn't come off great at times, especially with the interjections and kind of what he was saying. I think as it went on, Beane was able to kind of walk some things back that Pegula said and kind of add some context or add some framework to things. And I even think Pegula eventually got to hit as concise of a summarization of why he fired Sean McDermott as possible towards the back end of the presser, which, we'll talk about here in a bit, I'm assuming. But yeah, it started off just, I also think Pegula and Beane expected a lot of heat from the media. Like, I think they knew the temperature of the room from a media and or fan base, and kind of even how you led this off. I think they all knew, like, wait a minute, like, how come Beane is staying and he's getting promoted? So I think they were a bit on the defensive or the offensive, depending on how you look at it. And that shaped things a little bit. I also think Pegula is kind of like an anxious and nervous speaker, which is also why I think he did better towards the back end than he did in the beginning. And I don't agree with a lot of what he said, but at least at this point, we kind of know why he made the decision.
One of the interesting things that he certainly said, and there were two that stood out to me. The first one was that the decision to fire McDermott had to do with what was going on in the locker room after that game.
Yeah.
Sadness and despair and a team that was downtrodden, and that emotional thing that he experienced, which, by the way, I know he's an owner in the NFL. I'm sure he's been in the locker room before, but basically after any loss, players are pretty down in the mouth. I've been in a lot of locker rooms myself. It's not a fun place to be after a loss, especially when it's a monumental loss or a loss that means the season is over. Yeah. So that was very perplexing to me, that his explanation, or his primary, it seemed, as to why Sean McDermott was now no longer coach of the Bills was because he saw crying and sad faces. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, so he got asked, he mentioned that multiple times, but he got asked straight up, hey, when did firing Sean McDermott kind of come on the radar? Was this something you'd been thinking about for weeks? What was the thought process? And he said, quote, after the playoff, meaning the Denver game, but after the playoff game in the locker room, I need to keep saying that. I'll keep saying it. It was feeling the moment, being there. Then he also mentions again, if I could take you in that locker room, I felt we hit the proverbial playoff wall year after year. 13 seconds, missed field goals, the catch. I sensed in the locker room, where do we go from here with what we have? And that was the basis for my decision. So he
added second part of that actually makes a little sense. The first part, none. Go ahead.
Yes. So it does seem like he initially first framed it as, like, to your point, I went in the locker room and everybody was really upset and I decided Sean had to go. And it's like, what? And then you kind of realize, okay, it was more of a summation. It was kind of year after year, but I think it was brought on by that locker room moment. I think he walked into the locker room and saw, like he said, Josh was, his words, listless. He went up to Josh Allen and Allen didn't even acknowledge him. He was crying. He was sad, all this stuff. Like, I think he went into the locker room and saw how devastated everyone was. And that kind of flipped the switch a little in his brain. And he added that up with everything else that he had seen over the years. And I think that locker room moment was kind of not just the sole reason, but more of the straw that broke the camel's back for making that decision. And he even goes on to say later, This next quote that I'm going to read is like the one that I thought was everything. He says, he references the seating again, the whole like 5-2-3, 2-2-2-6. But he says, quote, great roster, good coaching, no Super Bowl appearance. And I can't emphasize, if I could put you all in that room, meaning the locker room, at that moment after the game, it's like, how do we overcome this? It's been 1 year after another. It was the sense of, how do we overcome this? And I just couldn't see us doing that with Sean. That's why I relieved him. It's not an easy decision, trust me, with that success. But what is success? Is success being in the playoffs 7 years in a row with no Super Bowl appearance? And then he kind of shrugs his shoulders and goes like, I don't know. So I think it was a culmination of things. It was, I think brought on and really spurred and pushed by that moment in the locker room. But he said some other things, which I also disagreed with, which I'll get to in a minute. But yeah, it was a culmination of things, but really the straw that broke the camel's back was being in that locker room after the Denver game.
And this has been just overall, Anthony, a remarkable year in this coaching cycle. To see guys who, at least in recent times, and in some cases in Sean McDermott's time, not at all, reaching the Super Bowl. And John Harbaugh, obviously relieved of his duties in Baltimore. Many people think he's a great coach. The Giants, I think, are very happy to have him.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin, obviously stepping away from the Steelers. Even Kevin Stefanski, to a certain extent, maybe not to the magnitude of those other guys who had some success coaching up guys in a difficult roster situation. So I guess I can see a little of what Pegula is saying there, but it still leaves me scratching my head a little bit that somehow Beane is exonerated and McDermott is guilty. I think that's the part that still I struggle with. Now let's answer this other part, because this is unprecedented territory for me in the years that I've covered the media. An owner throwing an individual player under the bus who's still rostered on the team. This guy is still on the roster. I mean, he probably shouldn't be tomorrow if he didn't call his agent 30 seconds after that happened. And poor Keon Coleman, not that he's been outstanding here and anywhere up to the expectations I think that many had for him, maybe even himself. He's still a young player. Who knows what he inevitably becomes, and he's still on this roster. But he was asked the question, Pegula was asked the question, or Beane was asked the question.
Beane was asked, Pegula interjected.
About the lack of receiver help that Josh Allen has had in recent years, which has been an ongoing theme. We've talked about it many, many times. Do they have enough? How are they going to do this? Yada, yada, yada. We've talked about the strength of the tight ends, but it hasn't worked out. The receiver situation hasn't worked out. Diggs had a nice little pop there for a while, and then everything kind of really got kind of worse. And they were trying to do it with a lot of weird pieces, including Brandon Cooks, of all people, who was literally on the scrap heap. But to make my point, so he's asked the question about the receiver situation, and then Pegula interrupts him and says, I'll take this one. I'll handle this one here, Brandon.
Let me get this,
right?
Brandon.
And the idea here was I'm going to defend Brandon, and his defense was, but he raises it by saying, the Keon situation or the Keon pick. It's like, wait a minute. He was just asked a general question about the weakness of the receivers. Now he's pointed directly at one of them and said, that guy is our problem right there. Like, yikes. Give me your take on that whole thing. I know it went beyond that, but that was the part that I was just like, oh, goodness, what are you doing, man? Go ahead.
It was really bad in that moment because the way Pegula framed it, he made it seem like Beane didn't want Keon Coleman.
Correct.
And the coaching staff wanted Keon. So that, in one way, it throws the coaching staff under the bus. But then it also throws Keon under the bus and is like, we don't want this guy. Like, so if the coaching staff was the ones who wanted him and they're gone, the people that are left are the ones who didn't want him. So it's like, oh, this is muddy. Like, what do you do? That was one of the big gaffes from Pegula in this one.
Keon's left with all the people that don't want him.
1,000%. Beane did a good job later. Like much later in the presser, he walked it back and he said, it wasn't that I didn't want Keon or the front office didn't. He was like, we just had a different order for the draft for Keon's ranking versus the coaching staff. And he said, quote, ultimately, I'm not turning in a pick for a player that I don't think we can succeed with. So don't misunderstand that. Keon's issues haven't been on the field. He's owned that. He doesn't make excuses. We were a little disappointed with how he came back last year from injury. Maturity stuff got in the way. He mentioned that a whole bunch. I think Beane did a good job later of walking it back to the point of what actually it was. And this is what I believe it was. Like this, like everybody has different orders for how they like guys. Like you like Timmy. I like Joe. I like Joe more than Timmy. You like Timmy more than I like Joe. So we have to sit there and go like, okay, which one do we take? And that happens all the time. Guys pound the table for player A. Other guys pound the table for player B. Sometimes you take A, sometimes you take B. I'm sure in this instance, right? Like the coaching staff pushed for Keon more than Beane did, or the personnel department did, and they took Keon. I'm guaranteeing there's been other times where Beane and the personnel department have pushed for someone and the coaching staff has been hesitant and they took the guy that the front office wanted. So it happens on both sides. It highlights the collaboration. But yeah, it really was tough in that moment because Pegula essentially was like throwing the staff under the bus, throwing Keon under the bus. But I thought Beane did a good job later of kind of walking it back. And I wanted to touch on something else you kind of mentioned in leading up to that. You talked about like, the coaching staff piece, like the Beane piece and Pegula's thoughts. And he had a really poignant quote because he was asked, what process he went through to evaluate if it was the coaching or the talent on the roster. And he goes, quote, "Well, you see the teams in the league, and I'm not going to mention team names, but they have a great year, a good year, and the next year the success doesn't continue. Like I say, you don't get in the playoffs 7 straight years in this National Football League where there are very few blowouts and dozens of close games every year. You don't get there without having talent and a great organization. And Brandon and his staff have brought in," and then he emphasizes, he goes, "regularly players that, I mean, look at the injuries we had this year. We're down guys on the practice squad contributing in big games. You don't do that without talent in the front office getting you there." And I think that's fair to say. I also think you don't have that sustained success without good coaching. But it seemed in that quote and in that moment, it appears like Pegula gave most or all of the credit for the Bills' sustained success to Brandon Beane,
To the talent.
to the personnel department. Yes. And he believes this roster has a bunch of talent. He believes Beane and the personnel department did a great job. And he, again, thinks the heavy burden of the failures, the heavy load of that lay at the feet of Sean McDermott, almost to the point where he didn't even really give McDermott any credit for that sustained success over the years. And I know I'm talking for a while in one segment. Can I bring up one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
This next one was the most important thing for me in the entire piece. He gets asked later. It was right after he talked that quote earlier where he said, well, what is success? Is success being in the playoffs 7 years with no Super Bowl? He gets asked, about the shortcomings for the team because he kept talking about it. He gets asked how much goes into the coaching versus the roster construction being responsible for those team shortcomings. And he says, quote, "That's a hard question to answer. I don't know the answer to that." Appreciate the honesty, but you should know the answer because you decided it was the coaching.
Coaching over the talent.
Correct. You decided that between coaching and roster construction, you decided the coaching was responsible for the shortcomings. So you should have an answer to that question. And that was my biggest thing. Like, as we got forward in that presser, we understood, like, okay, he felt they hit that proverbial wall. He felt that Sean was responsible or Sean wasn't the guy to get them over the hump or get them past the wall. But then you get asked like how you came to that conclusion and you say, "Oh, I don't know how to answer that." But that was your decision. That was the basis of this whole thing. So you should have an answer. And that one, I wanted to make sure I got that in there because I felt like it was so poignant and so also like, oh man, I really decided we should all drink lemonade. Oh, so what are your thoughts on the value of lemonade? I don't really have an answer for that. But you're telling what? I don't understand.
This is why generally owners shouldn't do press conferences or very rarely and only, introducing a coach or something like that. Because the fact of the matter is they're not used to this. They don't. I find it unbelievable because they are obviously typically very smart people. And yet they don't understand how to handle the media and how to handle questions. They don't prepare themselves properly, and then they slip up. And the problem is when the owner slips up, when the owner says Keon Coleman stinks, which is essentially what Terry Pegula said, in a veiled way.
Yeah, we regret this.
We really regret taking this guy. So far, he really stinks. Okay, that's what he really said. He might as well have just said that because that's what he said. All right. You can't, when the owner says it, there's no one else to blame above. Like, that is it.
That's where the buck stops.
That's what the program thinks of you. That's what the franchise thinks of you. You stink. There's no like, oh, Brandon thinks you stink. Oh, but Pegula loves you, so don't worry. There's always usually a level to push up for the guys that are taking the press conferences. The coach can blame the GM can blame the ownership. There's always a level up where you wonder, there's this mysterious thing going on up above that we don't know the real answer. This is the guy. This is why Jerry Jones gets killed all the time, because he is both the owner and the GM, and he wants to get in front of a microphone every week and say stupid things, and he says stupid things all the time. And you're just like, that guy is the guy that decides. The buck stops there. Therefore, what he says is the law. If he says Keon stinks, he thinks Keon stinks, which means the whole organization thinks Keon stinks, the poor guy.
Well said. And I also think tying into that too, like of like what Terry thinks, or tying into like him being the owner and decision making, Beane also had a couple of lines in this presser, because there was so much going on Monday and Tuesday. There was so much within the fan base of everybody kind of, I'm not throwing myself in this, but a lot of fans thought Beane like stabbed McDermott in the back. There was a lot of the memes of like Lord of the Rings of like worm tongue whispering in like Theoden's ear. Like that's how they were making it seem. Like Beane is sitting watching games with Pegula, and anytime someone does anything bad, Beane's like, oh, you see, Terry, like that was a guy that Sean wanted. I never wanted that guy. Like Sean's got to go. There was this growing sense of that, right? And a lot of it was due to how poorly the Bills PR team handled the early part of the week and the news for both sides. But Beane had a couple lines in that presser referring to like Terry's decision to fire Sean and Terry's decision, different like ways of saying that. And I've come to the conclusion after that presser of, my issue with Beane wasn't, I was like, oh, is he like, I was questioning like, oh, is he kind of a, what is this? But I wasn't really like, he's a snake, he's awful. My issue has been more like draft picks and salary cap management and contract extensions and free agents brought in and the money they gave them when it could have been put elsewhere. That was my crux and my issue. Yeah. But I really do think as the presser went on, it became, at least to me, like the thought that was in my mind, and I kind of say this jokingly, but I really do like believe it to a good chunk. I feel like Beane was in the office on Sunday and Terry walked into his office and was like, knock, knock. And Brandon was like, hey, Terry. And I feel like Terry was like, hey, I'm going to fire Sean today. And then like walked out of the office, and Beane was like, what? Like, I feel like it was one of those, your boss comes into your office and tells you he's making a decision and you have to go with it. Now, maybe Beane just kind of accepted that if this happened, or maybe he pushed back a little bit and was like, whoa, Terry, like, I don't think we should do that. I don't know any of that. Again, that's all complete, like just we're guessing and trying to put pieces together. Yeah, speculation. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. You're a professional. I was like, I know if I say enough things, context clues, he'll feed me the word speculation. But it does seem like this came, especially with Pegula saying like in the locker room, and I made the decision in that moment. I don't think it was like he sat down with Beane and they were like, we have to fire Sean. I think he made the call and Beane had to go along with it for better or for worse. I really do think this was a Terry Pegula holistic decision, and he pulled the trigger and Beane was like, okay, and had to go with it.
Wow. All right. Today's broadcast, this is Anthony Prohaska, Cover One. It's the Manchild Show with Boyd Green Digital. Don't forget to pop that subscribe button. We are growing in our subscribers. The bobbleheads have left the building, Anthony. Next up is the $400 golf club donated by our friends at Play It Again Sports. We're closing in on a monumental 500 subscribers. So we're a little baby still, but we're loving every minute of it and loving every single subscriber who joins our little army. So jump on in if you don't already and subscribe. It's absolutely free, and you can win free stuff, which is kind of cool. As we make our march towards 500. I think we're only about 20 subscribers away now. So get that done. Today's broadcast brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive. Let's just take 30 seconds, learn a little bit more about our friends from Bayberry. When we come back, I'm going to ask Anthony the pivotal question. Did Sean McDermott deserve to be fired? That question when we come back. Stick around.
Integrity is a word that some people just throw around in life. But at Bayberry Automotive, integrity is everything. Integrity of their mechanics, who are all experienced and certified. Integrity in the work they perform, with nothing but 5-star reviews from satisfied customers on Google. Integrity that goes along with family, a family-run business that treats you like one of their own. Integrity in everything. Bayberry Automotive. BayberryAutomotive.com.
Located on Route 57 across from Bayberry Plaza, the premier choice for auto repair in Liverpool.
All right, we are back. It's the Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital on YouTube. Become one of our army of subscribers as we continue to grow. That's Anthony Prohaska from Cover One across from me as we're talking Buffalo Bills football. Wow, what a lot to unpack coming off the press conference from yesterday. I told you I'd work my way backwards, and then we'll eventually maybe come full circle. All right, so let's continue our way back. Let me go back to the McDermott firing earlier this week. Anthony, I ask you this very direct question. Did Sean McDermott deserve to lose his job? What's the defense for? What's the defense, against?
I think it depends on what your expectations are or what the goal is. You mentioned earlier in this episode, Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, like these guys, right? Like there is something to be said for sustained success, getting to the playoffs every year, winning your division every year, being a Final Four team in the conference, being a Final Four team in the league, and making the championship game. I think Sean McDermott has had an extremely successful run with the Buffalo Bills. He turned this franchise around. You know it. I know it. I'm sure if Paul was here, he would have danced on this topic and talked about it a bunch. The drought years for the Bills, they were a laughingstock. Like they were all things aside, they were a joke of a franchise. And Sean McDermott came in, turned them around completely, gets them to the playoffs in his first year. In his third year, they start the run of playoffs year after year. They're winning division titles, and they're becoming an actual Super Bowl odds favorite year after year. And so I think he's had an extremely successful run. But once you start to, and this as a Giants person, once you start to build success, right, there becomes a certain level of expectation of Super Bowl and championship, and the Bills did not get there. And, based on that, I think Sean McDermott deserved to get fired, but I also don't think the grass is always greener. I've said this for the last couple of years because fire McDermott has been on the mind of so many fans. You can fire Sean McDermott and get a better coach and ride that to a championship. You could fire Sean McDermott and get another coach and be the same. You could fire Sean McDermott and get another coach and tank and be absolutely worse. I just don't think the grass is always greener, and I think there's something to be said for sustained success. And that's such a fine line to thread, right? Because in order to win a Super Bowl, you have to get to the playoffs. So that's a successful thing. And so how do you parse somebody who's good enough to get you to the playoffs year after year, but maybe isn't good enough to get you the Super Bowl and get you a championship? And I don't think there's a right answer to it. And I think you can play both sides of it. And things can also change in the blink of an eye. Like you and I have talked about this before on the show. Philly fans were happy to send Andy Reid packing. And then Chiefs fans were like, again, we got this loser of a coach.
Right.
We keep
Look how that
losing.
turned out.
Yes, we're losing year after year. Marcus Mariota's bouncing the ball off and catching it himself and scoring, and we're losing at home on a Saturday night to the Titans. This is a joke. And now we're sitting here, 7-8 years later, and Andy Reid is being talked about as arguably the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah.
Because all you do is win one and the narrative completely changes.
Yep.
My thing with all of it, I was fine if McDermott stayed. I was fine if McDermott went. I think there's something to be said for the sustainability and the consistency that he brought. And I do think he's a good coach and a good culture setter. But there have been specific failures that can be laid at his feet, specific failures that he's responsible for. So if you wanted to keep him cool, if you wanted to see him go, that's fine. The bigger thing for me is, and tying it into kind of the Brandon Beane promotion, I just don't think you can lay everything at the feet of Sean McDermott. All of these failures and shortcomings in the playoffs are not just because of Sean McDermott. Brandon Beane's hands are also bloody. Brandon Beane is also culpable, just like Brandon Beane's hands are bloody and culpable in success, just like Sean McDermott is. I think there was so much collaboration between the two and so much interconnectedness that it's hard for me to just separate it and say, this was McDermott, this was Beane, one of them's got to go. I thought if one of them went, both of them would or should go because of how significantly culpable they both are.
Okay.
So that was my biggest thing with all of this. Is it isn't that McDermott got fired, it's that they seem to lay all the failures at his feet, and I don't think that's accurate.
Let me go backwards one more time before we move back forward. Okay. Last one here on the backwards front that goes all the way back to the game. Very direct question for you again. Was it a catch or was it an interception? What was your take on the controversial play with Brandon Cooks?
In the moment, I thought it was an interception. I thought Cooks made the catch, came down with it, and as he was coming down and rolling, McMillan got it and took it. I also think based on Cooks' reaction, a couple people have mentioned Cooks needed to be more demonstrative that he caught it. He needed to sell it.
Right.
I don't know if he got hurt, if it was his shoulder
or
his head.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think he kind of got dazed a little bit or hurt, and that's what helped McMillan take the ball. Like, I don't know if he like got knocked out for a minute or his shoulder came out and it got wrestled away. Something happened in that rollover. In real time, I thought it was an interception. I thought it was a catch, like watching it when it literally happened. And then on the replays, I thought it was an interception. Now with all the screenshots and the different angles and everything that's came out,
What do you think now?
I kind of think it was a catch based off of some of the things we see, and then how painfully ironic we get like a similar moment later in, or what is it, like later that night, or oh no, the day after in the Bears Rams game with Devontae Adams.
Yes.
And people are bringing back things from different times. And also too, someone brought up a positive one for the Bills. In New England, Khalil Shakir had one where Marcus Jones like ripped it away from him, but they ruled it a catch for Shakir. And that one was extremely similar to Cook's. Now I'm like, at first I was like, oh, that's an interception. Now I'm like 55-45 catch. But honestly, I'm trying not to think about it because the more I think about it, the more upset I'm going to get.
Herein lies the problem, Anthony. The fact that we have to spend 10 minutes talking about it, many, many days later, tells us one very simple demonstrative thing. The rule needs to be more clear. It needs to be simpler for everyone to understand.
And isn't that such a crazy thing?
Microscopic breakdown. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Like, it's a catch. Like, that's such a fundamental thing that we need to have clarified. That's such an important part of football.
Very important.
Yeah. How do we not know?
Football,
Yeah. How do we not know that?
What's a fumble? What's a catch? I mean, there are things in the game that you need to be very, very clearly defined, that there is no gray area. This is how it is judged. And you want every fan to understand that, so that every time you see it on a replay, you know one or the other. You're not like, well, it could have in this situation because he was in the air, because he was rolling. In this one, the ground, he has to survive it. In this one, he made a football move. We've added survive the ground, football move. With these stupid peripherals, we're like, is it a catch? That's all we want. We just want to be fans. Did he catch it? Looks like it to me. It's a catch. That's what you need. Football needs to be smarter about how it defines its rules, but instead they become more and more gray. It's terrible. Terrible.
It's bad. And you've got like you've got so many people coming out, and I think more people lean towards it being a catch. But all these former players are like, how is that not a catch? I don't understand. And then you've got other people being like, he didn't survive the ground. Clearly this. And it exactly to your point, like it's such a, I don't know how there's so much gray in that. Like it's either a catch or it's not. And yeah, sometimes, you got to get 2 feet down and make a football move. You got to get 2 feet down and make a football move and survive the ground. And because that was also me too, like he makes the catch, gets the feet down, knee goes down, and then he's rolling through. Isn't that a football move? But does surviving the ground trump the football move? Because I always thought surviving the ground was like you dive to make a catch.
Right. Yes.
And then you're hitting the ground. That like there's
it doesn't involve another player per
se. There's no chance for a football move, which is why you have to catch it and survive the ground. But if you catch it while you're running across the field, if you catch it 1-2 and then juke and then fall down to the ground after being touched down and the ball comes out, surviving the ground doesn't matter because you made a football move. Right. At least I think, or that's what I thought. But there's also even been errors in the Jacksonville game. Josh Allen slides and they give him the marker where his slide finished. And even the broadcast was like, yep, that's the rule where the slide finishes. No, it's not. It's where you start your slide. The Bills should have been backed up. And nobody was addressing that. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, I thought I've understood this rule for like 30 years. It's where you start your slide. Is it not? I just don't understand, especially in this day and age where there's so much tech and so much like money in this sport.
Right.
We shouldn't have so many arbitrary things. There shouldn't be.
Bad.
Yes, ambiguity is the better word. Thank you. Yeah, we just shouldn't. We shouldn't have that. I don't understand. I don't understand it.
It needs to change. How about I'll be Abbott, you be Costello, and we'll just do who's on first, because that's pretty much what this sounds like, right? All these days later, and we're still like, is it a catch? Is it a catch? And it's interesting. You live in Bills Nation, and literally and figuratively, and you made the statement among the things you're saying there that I think more people thought it was a catch. I live in more neutral ground where more people are saying it wasn't a catch. So both of my partners, Paul and my old partner Bud, emphatically said, "Oh no, that wasn't a catch." I was like,
I'm gonna
like
also.
I'm a little more
I would never believe
trying
Paul.
To understand and interpret the rule within the context, to me, by the eyes, after seeing the replay, to me, it looks like a catch. But now I get this whole thing of if we were in the air or they survived the ground, if that's truly the rule, all right, I guess it's an interception, but it's stupid. That's what I said.
And also,
those guys don't. Those guys said, no, that was an interception.
I also would never trust Paul because of how much of a Jets homer he is. So I'm never, he's going to take the Jets side no matter what, just because he hates the Bills. But I also agree with McDermott of like, especially with how much is being analyzed now, how is that not like a 10-minute booth review? Like they were just like, yep, that's an interception. That's it. Move on. Next play. Yes.
That's what incensed McDermott is. How do you not look at this? Come on.
How do you not look at that?
The most pivotal play in the game at this moment. This could decide the game. Will decide the game. So can you at least take a moment here? This is one where we wouldn't mind if you take 3 or 4 minutes and delay the game to get it right. We all hate that as fans, but on a pivotal moment like this, we'll take the 3-minute delay to get the call right.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have reversed it anyway, based on everything we've heard.
No, but it felt like it deserved more angles. It deserved,
especially McDermott's point. He hated that it went against him, but he really was incensed that they didn't look at it, that they didn't take their time, that they got the quick supposed signal from New York. No, you're right. It's an interception. Come on. There is no quick on that one. You and I have looked at it over and over and over again, and we're still like, but this thing and connected to this thing and that thing, like we're still trying to put the pieces together as non-officials, and that's what every fan was probably doing, especially those that are Bills fans who wanted it to be a catch.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, crazy, crazy. One more on this, and then I want to move quickly forward to what's next. You kind of addressed it earlier, so I think your answer to this is going to be no. But there was this report by Vic Carucci, who we know is one of the Bills insiders. He's covered him for a long time, about this meeting weeks ago between McDermott, Beane, and Pegula, where essentially McDermott expressed his disappointment in the Keon, Coleman, the whole thing. Okay. I don't have the players, right? The quote was, forget about Keon Coleman. Sorry. I don't want to throw Keon under the bus anymore. That I don't have the players to make it to to win a Super Bowl. That was his what came out of that was that supposedly McDermott said something along the ilk of we're lacking the players to really go the distance. And Beane's in that meeting and Pegula's in that meeting. Now that's a dangerous thing to do because you are essentially criticizing the GM in front of the owner and saying to the owner, I don't think we have the guys. Now, I don't know if that was McDermott's intention. I think he was just saying something that was on his mind, but I wonder after the door closed, was that the beginning of what could have been a power struggle between either I survive or you survive? Brandon Beane is thinking, well, you just threw me under the bus. I better start defending myself. And maybe that's part of what convinced Terry Pegula that if they didn't get there this year, that this was going to be the end of the road. Give me a quick take on that.
There's a possibility for it. I think with what Pegula said in the presser, of, he hadn't started thinking about firing Sean until being in the locker room in that Denver game. Although, obviously there were moments that led to the straw, that straw breaking the camel's back. And that was talked about a little in the presser, the disconnect between, Brandon and Sean and, how much that existed or the dissolving of the relationship. Some people reference that exact moment in that meeting. Beane was pretty adamant about there not being a disconnect and there not being a dissolving of the relationship. It's just healthy disagreeing and healthy arguments. And even that, you could play devil's advocate and do we know, maybe the question in that meeting that came up, or maybe the reason Sean said it and they were like, oh, well, how do we feel about the roster, going into next year? What do we need to tweak? And maybe Sean was like, well, as it stands right now, I don't think the roster is good enough. So this is what we need to do next year. Maybe it was more innocent that was made out to be, but then also who's feeding Vic Carucci that story? Is it the McDermott camp? What's the reason that got out? Yada, yada, all that kind of stuff. It's so muddy and so messy. I don't think there was a full disconnect, but I think the two of them had, Beane and McDermott, I think they had disagreements, but I think every GM and coach has disagreements. Just it's just human nature. You don't have to be a coach and a GM. It could be you and your boss. It could be you and your buddy. Yeah, no, especially with something as arbitrary and subjective as and ambiguous as player evaluation and scheme. You could think a 3-4 is better. I could think a 4-3 is better. You could make the case for either. There's no hard and concrete, hard and fast right answer. So I think there were disagreements. I don't necessarily think it was maybe the power struggle it got made out to be. And I do think, again, at the end of the day, I think Pegula was the one who came out and said, I think he went to Beane and said, we're firing Sean. I don't think he even sat down and said, hey, Brandon, I'm thinking of firing Sean. What are your thoughts? I think he went and told Beane, I'm going to fire Sean. And that was it.
I don't have any doubt that it was the owner's decision ultimately, one way or the other. How it went down, we probably will never know unless they have another press conference, and then Pegula will probably spill it all over the table like he started to do yesterday. All right, so let's go forward on each tentacle here real quickly. What's next for McDermott first? Okay, so he's out as Bills coach. There are still plenty of openings here. Do you see him jumping right back in? Do you see him sitting back a year and waiting for the right opportunity? Give me your thought on that one real quick.
My initial gut reaction was, and still kind of is, I feel like he's going to take some time. I feel like he's going to take a year, maybe. Again, especially if this decision was made kind of after that game, I think it's fair to kind of be surprised by that if you're McDermott, or be rightfully like upset. And I can understand not getting back on the horse. And I think he wants to be smart and calculated about where he goes. But you could make the case for the other side of maybe he's super driven and motivated and pissed off, and he wants to get in somewhere right away and show what he can do. And I do think there are some openings that kind of fit for him a little bit, but my gut right now says he's going to take a year and kind of sit and bide his time, and then come back and be a hot name on the market next year.
Hey, note to Sean, many years ago, the Manchild here got a chance to take to allow someone else to keep their job and to take a layoff, for someone else, take the hit for someone else. They paid me for a year, gave me a year's pay. That was the incentive to take the hit for someone else, and I did it. And that was the greatest thing I ever did. Getting paid for a year without working while I was doing the things that I loved, that was like the greatest year of my life. So Sean McDermott, take a year, pal. Hit the Bahamas, maybe check out Hawaii. There's places all over the world. Go enjoy yourself for a year. Come on back. It'll all be waiting for you.
He could probably use a vacation. He grinds super hard. Yeah, take the vacation.
No one's going to forget all the success this guy's had. He is going to be a hot commodity, whether it be right now or whether it be a year from now or even 2 years from now. So unless you get a game away from the game for a long time, where people start to think they out of touch, and a year certainly doesn't indicate that. And I'm sure every television network will be asking him to come in and do guest appearances and this and that as much as he wants to do. What about for the Bills, Anthony? My final question here. How do the Bills move forward now? Do you have any sense of who their next head coach might be? And is it going to be better than the situation with Sean McDermott? Yikes.
I'll work backwards to front. If it's going to be so hard to top what Sean McDermott's done. The only way to top what Sean McDermott has done is to win the Super Bowl. All right, well, I should say get there and then win it, because the sustained success year after year, division championships, going to the playoffs, being a Final Four team in the conference, that's a hard thing to do. So it's going to be hard to surpass what McDermott has done. The only way to do it is to get to a Super Bowl and or win the Super Bowl. So literally it's just going to be time will tell. And I think it's 50-50 either way. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, though it could be. As far as where they go, Beane mentioned it a little yesterday. It's 100% an open search. Old coaches, young coaches, first-time coaches, veteran coaches, all that kind of stuff. I think they're going to lean offense. Just with, Beane, one of Beane's early quotes was, quote, "We have an MVP quarterback and we've got to help him get to the Super Bowl and bring a championship to Buffalo." I think they're going to lean offensive head coach. Yeah, I think it's going to be more of an offensive head coach that also serves as your offensive coordinator or whatever, like Andy Reid or Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, whatever, that's some type of deal. If you also believe some of the rumors, Clint Kubiak might be at the top of their list, that this firing was maybe quote unquote kind of made with Clint Kubiak coming in, the offensive coordinator for Seattle being the, replacement in mind potentially. But I do think they're going to lean offense. I think they're probably going to lean more younger than anything, because they want to build this sustainably. I think they want a guy who they can just bring in a la a McVay or a Shanahan, where, hey, we got this young, smart up and coming offensive mind. Here we go. Plug him in. That stays consistent year after year after year. We'll find somebody to run the defense and keep doing that and go from there. So my thought is they lean offense. And I think Kubiak is the front runner.
Does Dable or Brady make any sense to you or not? Both obviously having been and one continuing to be in the organization. Do either one of those guys who are obviously being rumored about there make any sense? I know Dable has the roots in Buffalo, so that strengthens his case a little bit. Go ahead.
I think they both make sense from an organizational standpoint, from a Beane and Pegula standpoint. I don't want either of them as the head coach, but I could understand it. Yeah, fair. You know all about Dable. I think it could make sense. I just don't want to go either route. You and I have talked about it on the show before, like Dable's tenure in New York and just just so many things schematically and personality wise that just did not work. And so I don't really want any of that back in Buffalo. And he had kind of a messy exit on his way out in Buffalo and kind of a messy exit on his way out in New York. And just, I don't want any parts of that. And then Brady, I think he got more flack as an offensive coordinator than he deserved, but I also thought he got too much praise when things were going well than he deserved. So I'm kind of wishy-washy on him, and I don't really want him steering the ship right now. I don't think I value him enough as an offensive mind. And then that combined with the lack of head coaching experience gives me pause a little bit. I would prefer, if it was between the two, like if I had to pick one, I would pick Brady over Dable because I'm scared off of Dable right now.
I'm a little warmer and fuzzier to Brian Dable these days than I was, say, even a week ago, because allegedly, apparently, and I believe it to be true, good sources are saying that Brian Dable actually told John Harbaugh that the Giants' job is a good job. He apparently endorsed the Giants to John Harbaugh, that there was a phone call or a conversation between these two, and, that Dable actually put in the good word for the Giants who had fired him. So you don't find many coaches doing that. You get fired and you put in the old good word, especially midstream. A guy was literally fired in the middle of the season. You can't imagine that taste has left his mouth yet, and yet he was a stand-up guy, it seems, here in saying, no, that's a great job.
Fair. I have a quick question for you. If the Giants head coaching job was still open right now, would you want Sean McDermott or would you want Harbaugh? Or did you want somebody else out of that? But where would Sean McDermott factor in for you? Hey, if the Giants job was still open right now, or if McDermott had been fired, last week before Harbaugh got the job?
My order would be this. That's a great question, and I think actually a really, thought-provoking question. I think my order would be Tomlin 1. Obviously, Tomlin's not coming to coach anybody, it seems, at this point. But I'm just saying the guys that are potentially out there, and Tomlin, to me, is potentially out there, whether he keeps saying I'm sitting or whatever. Who knows? Things can always change. So I would have wanted Tomlin first. That didn't happen. Harbaugh was second on my list. Excuse me.
Harbaugh too.
And I would have slid McDermott right behiund Harbaugh. And then Stefanski and company after that. So that would have been my pecking order. Although I wouldn't have been immensely disappointed if Sean McDermott ended up being the guy, because Harbaugh went somebody where else or didn't want to coach this year like Tomlin. I would have been okay, I think, with any of those three top guys for sure. Stefanski I have more questions about than I do the others. So he would definitely be a tier below. But those three guys, I think, are all incredibly quality, talented head coaches. One of the things that's impressed me most about Sean McDermott, just to speak of him for a minute, since you asked about him.
Sure.
Number one, I don't cover the Bills like you do, but I've gone to some training camps, and I've been around them enough. I follow them closely enough to, appreciate what it is that he is and what his connection is to the organization and how he conducts himself. I find him to be a really upstanding guy. I what he did during that DeMar Hamlin situation to me was really, really well done. The way that he integrates himself into the Buffalo community and became kind of one of their own, I think is really, really remarkable. It's not easy to do those things, and he really, really warmed himself and embraced. He hugged that city. I just think he's a class act. I just think he's a class act. I think he treats his players extremely well. I think he's a very good defensive coach, and I think he's a good head coach. And I think the results prove it. But we're in this new world, Anthony. It's called POM. I don't know that I invented this, but it stands for prisoner of the moment. We live in a POM world where everybody wants their ring now. And if they don't get one, they feel like there's a reason why they're not getting it. And they never feel that the reason is just because someone else is better. Okay. Patrick Mahomes has made life miserable for Josh Allen, for Lamar Jackson, and any other good quarterback in the AFC that dreams of winning a title, because he was winning them all. Okay. Yeah. He was getting to them all because he's really good and his coaching staff is really good. And the players that they put around him were really good. That's sometimes it's the opponent is the one that stops you. It's not you. It's them. They're trying to win too. Everybody's trying to win the games. So it's not always you. You're not always flawed because you don't win. Sometimes the other guy's just a little better. Just is that way. Maybe if they had, a couple of players from there were over here, you're the winner and they're the loser. It's the way it goes. Mahomes is a remarkable talent, and so is Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a remarkable talent. But Mahomes, at this point, these guys still have many years to play, has had the level of consistency and the excellence in the moments most needed to save his team sometimes. And he hasn't always had to be. And by the way, they never do it on their own. They never do it on their own.
Oh, yeah, never.
Always help. You tell me if Kansas City wins all those titles without Chris Jones on that defensive line and some of the big plays that he's made over the years. So it's always a team effort. It's never one guy. And Josh Allen went out and had a bad game this past weekend. Okay, it happens. It happens. He turned it over a bunch of times. I mean, it was sloppy. All right. And they still could have won. And they still had the lead. Like, it's amazing that they even did in spite of that. So sometimes the other guy's just better. Like my old partner taught me that many years ago. Sometimes the other guy's just better.
It happens. Sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way.
It's about your way. So you can't, it's not always a blame game. And I hate when it becomes simply a blame game because the grass is not always greener. I am very, very curious, Anthony, now that they have jettisoned off what I think is an excellent coach, how they move forward with the new guy and whether the new guy can live up to that standard of excellence that the other guy has set. Without, could be a tidal wave in the wrong direction. Having Josh Allen kind of slows the opportunity that it's going to be a tidal wave. Yeah. But could it be not as nice? Absolutely. Could it be more these second place finishes behind other teams in the division that seem to be rising and lack of really putting a good roster together from top to bottom? That could continue. Could get worse. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting watch for sure, which is why we have you on every week to talk all about it, my friend. Thanks as always, man. Great to break this down with you. And sorry your team's out. Mine's been out for a long time. Boy Green, they never had a chance. There you go. We're all in the same boat now. We can all just commiserate together, my friend.
Yeah. Good times. It's we'll see. We'll see what happens going forward for all three of those teams. And from a Bills perspective, it's going to be interesting. Especially if they start out slow next year. The fan base still very much feels like McDermott got done pretty wrong. And if they start out like 0-1 or 1-2, or if it's an offensive guy who comes in and the offense sputters to start, you're going to get a lot of like, why did we get rid of McDermott? It's the same thing. You know why? It's because of Beane and it's because of the roster and this and that. I tell you one thing, though, I am interested. I think Beane is going to try and take as big of a swing as he can this offseason to get it done and prove that it wasn't him, that he wasn't the problem, or that he deserves to be there. Contracts are going to kind of get in the way and some of the salary cap stuff, but I do think they're legitimately going to try and make a big move. I think it'll probably come at wide receiver. I think they're going to try and trade for a name and kind of shore up that spot and change the vibes a little bit and try and swing for the fences as much as they can.
You know what's interesting to me? I know they didn't make a Super Bowl with Stephon Diggs, but there seemed to be an uptick when they had him and when he was operating at full capacity there before it all kind of went wrong. And I was very surprised when they parted company with Diggs that they didn't look for something similar or something better to really just kind of lock it down,
They were pivoting to that everybody eats model and going bigger body types at wide receiver, condensed formations, running the football, putting defenses in run pass conflict, and they thought they could live that way. And I do think you can live that way. And if you have a true number one, that can help that even further. But I don't even think they need a true number one. They just need certain elements at wide receiver, either like just an overall good player can do everything, or certain elements and traits like speed and verticality in a top of the depth chart guy.
Yeah.
Their issue was just that they swung it too far in one direction. Like they got rid of Diggs and were like, oh, we'll be fine. We'll cobble it together. And you can do that, but you need to cobble it better. Like you can't just be a 9 as a running team and a 2 out of 10 as at receiver or the pass game. You need to be more like a 4 or a 4.5. They swung it too far in one direction. And I think they've realized that now. I mean, again, they knew it coming out. The same day that Beane goes on the radio and does that wide receiver rant, they were already bringing in Elijah Moore. Like they recognized it the offseason. They recognized it through the year with trying to bringing in Cooks, and granted Palmer's injury hurt and Keon not developing hurt and all that kind of stuff. So there are variables there, but they know that they swung the pendulum too hard in one direction. And I think they are going to go for a true top of the depth chart wide receiver via trade. You could get a rookie in the first round, but there's no guarantees there. I think they're going to go out and try and get a name and make a big splash and be like, see, look, we're listening to you. We're doing what everybody wants. See, we're going hard. We're going to do this. Like, I think they want to try and get the fan base back on their side and kind of, quell the doubters.
Yep. The danger, of course, they get that guy, and then the coach doesn't get the job done.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. Then you get bigger problems. Maybe they'll all be pointing the finger at the GM. Who the heck knows? All right. Thank you, Anthony. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.